Joining me now, the great Steve Miller, White House Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy. Bet you liked all those riffs, didn't you? You probably liked them all. Go ahead, Steve.
They were great and insightful as usual, my friend.
Thanks very much. So, Steve, I want something else. Something we talked about in last night's show. Debanking. I mean, it's the most extraordinary story that Mr. Trump was talking on one of the networks yesterday, that J.P. Morgan Chase actually said to him, you got to get all your bank accounts out in 20 days. Debanking. Reputational risk threats or some garbage like that. So the rumors are, of course, that there's going to be a debanking reform executive order coming out. I hope it comes soon. I hope it punishes any of this debanking stuff against, you know, political figures, conservatives, Christians, religious people, oil companies, and you name it. Can you tell us when this executive order is actually going to come out and give us a sense of how tough it's going to be?
Yes, well, as you know better than most, Larry, you've talked about it, you've covered it. We talk a lot about the weaponization of the justice system, but we haven't talked as much about the weaponization of the financial system. One of the worst features of the last 4 years under Biden and Democrat rule, but of course it also precedes that too, is the use of banking and access to the financial system to enforce a regime of censorship and political control, right? Like something out of a communist country. We all know stories of people who had their platforms, their financial platforms, taken away from them simply because of how they thought or how they spoke or what their political beliefs were. As we've explored this and examined this as the White House, we found these practices are even more widespread than previously known. As you mentioned, they use this pretext of reputational risk as a basis for financial censorship, which is truly odious, truly un-American, truly dangerous to liberty in every sense. So we've worked closely with Secretary of the Treasury Scott Bessent on developing a financial enforcement mechanism to ensure that those who participate in the banking system are not debanking and financially deplatforming Americans as a result of their political beliefs. And we're hopefully going to have that product finished soon, and we'll be able to bring that to the president for signature. As he's identified, this is a top priority for him.
It's a wide range. You know, you're right. The weaponization stuff. I mean, the reputational risk. I mean, that could be anything. I mean, look what they did to President Trump. It was remarkable. He had banked at Bank of America or J.P. Morgan. All of a sudden, they and other banks turned him down.
Yeah, he's Exhibit A in the weaponization of our financial system.
Yep.
Look, if you can take away the ability of a person to do business, to engage in commerce because of what they believe, then we're not a free country. We're tilting towards, in that case, a Marxist economy or a totalitarian economy, but not a free market economy. Champions of freedom and liberty should abhor the idea that large banks can collude or act individually to strangle the finances of people they don't like simply because of what they think, what they believe, or who they are.
And the other part of it, Steve, and you're going to have a chance to change this, I hope. The Federal Reserve, which is the principal bank regulator, not the only one, there's the Office of the Controller of the Currency and the FDIC, all these regulators, you know, from time to time under Biden, what did they do? I mean, they debanked Christians. They debanked religious groups. They talked about ESG, which was a way of saying no lending to fossil fuel companies, oil and gas companies, because of this climate radicalism that they were pushing. They talked about you can't make loans to companies unless they pass certain DEI rules.
Yes.
Essentially, super affirmative action stuff. In other words, you got regulators who are over-regulating for political reasons. That's got to stop, too. I mean, it's beyond debanking. It now becomes a regulatory and supervisory issue.
Yes, financial regulators and banking regulators who have embraced, whether it be DEI or anti-Christian bigotry or the ESG ideology, are all examples of using state power through either actual regulation or the implicit threat of regulation, which was pervasive during the Biden years, to get our banking system and our financial system to coerce this behavior that is flatly illegal. And that's how you end up with widespread ESG policies, illegal DEI and racial discrimination policies, and other discriminatory regimes all throughout our financial system. The left is very smart when it comes to this in a very sinister, horrible way. They figure out if they can get inside of the financial system, they can take radically unpopular ideals and shove it down the throats of the American people. That's what we're fighting against. That's what we're fighting to reverse. And of course, this administration has been aggressive in using the Department of Justice to make clear that these kinds of policies, DEI in particular, which also a big part of ESG, are illegal and unconstitutional and impermissible in American society.
All right, one more. Put your economic hat on. I know you got one. You can pull it out of your pocket if you like. I am very concerned that the high interest rate policies of one Jerome Powell are blocking what should be a phenomenal Trump boom. Now, I know the president likes to play up the economy, and I understand business investment looks pretty good. I got that. But there are sectors of the economy that don't look so good. Interest rate sectors, interest sensitive. Housing's been in a downturn recession for a couple of years. And housing affects a lot of other industries as well. The car business softening, all right, down to 15 million in sales. There are other areas. Private jobs, look, they've really moved down to stall speed, to quote Christopher Waller. And without question, the short-term interest rate is about, I don't know, it's at least 150 basis points too high, the Fed's rate. So question is now, what's your assessment of the economy? Do you see the same things? I'm making a plea here. You know, I know we want to be rosy scenario. And I know that the one big beautiful bill is going to power a tremendous future economy. But I'm worried in the next 6 months, Stephen Miller, I'm worried. I'm worried about the stall speed for private jobs. I'm worried about the housing downturn. I'm worried about the automobile downturn. I'm worried about a bunch of things right now. And I see the Federal Reserve as really taking a very hostile position and essentially thwarting, stopping, or at least slowing down the Trump boom. Go ahead. Be an economist.
Well, first of all, as you remember, Larry, during the first Trump administration, President Trump built the strongest economy both in the history of this country and also, really, in the history of the world. And President Trump right now inherited from Joe Biden a dead, flatlined economy. It was a cardiac patient, there would have been no heartbeat. And he has systematically, in a period of just a few months, put in place the most ambitious deregulatory regime in history, the most ambitious pro-energy regime in history. We just got rid of, for example, the endangerment finding, which for those of you who are familiar with that issue, that is the gold standard deregulatory action. In other words, getting rid of the endangerment finding is the most pro-growth deregulatory action you could have in energy and the economy. Obviously, we passed the largest tax cut and reform in American history. We made expensing permanent. And of course, we instituted the enormous reshoring incentives both in that bill and then also combined with President Trump's tariffs and trade deals. Every single thing is in place, Larry, for the greatest jobs boom we have seen in our lifetimes. Of course, we've already seen, as you mentioned in your intro, American workers are gaining back all the jobs they lost in the Biden administration that went to illegal migrants. The only thing that is missing from this entire piece of this extraordinary economic renaissance is the fact that Jerome Powell has kept the interest rates too high, which, as you mentioned, has made it harder for young Americans to afford homes and get into the housing market. But let's not understate, Larry, just how much incredible economic policy has been injected here. The tax cuts, the expensing, the deregulation, the American energy, the historic trade deals. We have opened up so many markets for American exports, Larry, in the EU, in Japan, in Korea. I mean, this is a complete game changer for American manufacturing. Plus, the way the president is investing in and leaning into the industries of the future, like AI, like chips, like semiconductors. So we have a technology boom, we have an innovation boom, we have a manufacturing boom, and we're going to have the jobs boom that we've been talking about. So, yeah, we got to deal with Jerome Powell and the Federal Reserve, but the fundamentals that President Trump has put into place are rocket fuel for this economy, and that's why we're seeing this incredible growth in jobs for American workers.
All right. I just want to hear you talk economics. You know that. That's, you know, former budget staff guy. People don't know that. You have a great long history of it. Steve Miller, thanks for coming back on. Appreciate it very, very much.